Hello, hello. Yeah. Can you guys hear me? All right, cool. Yeah, so we'll first do like a very, very short talk here. I do like a 3 to 5 minute intro talk, and then that will lead into the panel just mentioned. This is an abbreviated talk. The previous panel talked a lot about compliance and privacy and so on. I gave a previous talk at Cyberpunk Congress that also touched on this, and it will be a longer version of this talk at DeFi Today later today. But what I want to talk about is institutional privacy on Ethereum. My name is Oskar, and I'm the IPTF lead at the Ethereum Foundation together with Mo, and it stands for Institutional Privacy Task Force. And why does institutional privacy matter? It matters for a few reasons. I think one big reason is that if you look at these massive sort of financial institutions that exist, we're talking about trillions of dollars in monetary flow. And it used to be that institutions, that regulation was the biggest blocker for them moving on chain. But what's happened in the last few years, now actually privacy is the biggest blocker for them. So what's the leverage and impact here? I think even just moving 1% of traditional finance funds to Ethereum would have like massive impact in terms of the impact Ethereum can have on privacy and so on. And just having a single institution onboarded here also touches on like millions of users, right? This is not hypothetical. There are institutions that are already on chain, and there's multiple things happening over the next year or so here. There's like massive leverage, and the time for this is now in terms of institutions moving on chain with privacy built in. And a single institution, large institution here, can have a massive impact compared to, in terms of which ecosystem eventually win. If it's Ethereum or if it's sort of more private versions. It matters a lot how sort of we enable these type of use cases. Why do they want Ethereum? There's a few reasons, things like liquidity, sensor persistence, like 10-year uptime, and being like a sort of a selling point in terms of settlement. There are other alternatives as well, but they have different limitations. But in order for Ethereum to sort of onboard these institutions, they need to sort of address these privacy concerns they have. So what are those? And this leads to IPTF and why we started. So it stands for Institutional Privacy Task Force. What we're trying to do is onboard institutions onto Ethereum and making sure that privacy goals are met. And we do things like workshops and so on, and trying to kind of demystify the space and make sure that we can address institutional needs when it comes to privacy specifically. The first artifact we have is this institutional privacy map, where basically we talk to these massive institutions, we try to understand what are the business use cases and requirements, and then we open source as much of that as possible, and then we talk to various vendors in the space and sort of specification experts, and basically try to connect these two things, both the institution on one side and then the solution space on the other side. And it's very much a work in progress. I'm going to skip all of this, and here's the QR code to the map, if you're interested in learning more about this. But now let's move on to the panel.
That was impressive speed.
All right.
Yeah. Quite impressive, I'd say, yeah?
Sorry?
Quite impressive for speed.
Sorry, it was a bit fast, but hopefully it was understandable. So this panel has sort of a lot of experts across sort of research and policy and engineering and so on, and we'll talk about institutional privacy. So just a brief introduction. So we have Eugenio, who's the head of growth at the European Blockchain Association, and Italy's ICO credited expert at TC307. He engages with EU institutions, regulators, and industry to align decentralized identity, privacy-preserving infrastructure, and blockchain governance with emerging international standards. And then we have Zach. Zach Obront is the CTO of Etherealize, where he's building institutional products, and the underlying privacy primitives needed to support them. He previously worked as a security researcher, securing tens of billions in TVL and serving as a steward for EF's $1 trillion security initiative. And then we have Amzah, who spent most of his career in financial risk management before getting deeply involved in Ethereum and crypto space. And now he's bridging traditional controls with Ethereum native markets to advance tokenized assets and resilient institutional frameworks. And finally, we have Francois, who's a senior staff protocol engineer at Polygon Miden, who's focusing on zero knowledge proofs, systems, and thoughtful privacy. With prior roles as executive and co-contributor across blue chip Web3 teams, he leverages experience working on enterprise software to design compliance workflows for Web3. And as I mentioned, I am leading this IPTF, Institutional Privacy Task Force at the Ethereum Foundation. So I think maybe to get started, like in one sentence or maybe a few sentences, what institutional problems are you working on that actually requires privacy on public rails rather than just a traditional database or private chain? Maybe we can start with Francois.
Yeah, so
Yeah, of course, you can always build on a private blockchain, but today we believe that institutions want to access global liquidity that is offered by Ethereum, while at the same time retaining what they have from the traditional finance world, which is a degree of privacy. That allows them to trade with global liquidity, but while not making the entirety of their trades public. For us, that's why it's important both to build privacy in, but also to build on Ethereum.
Well, maybe I can take this from a more different perspective, from standard perspective. I think institution, and in the standard process, there is a very important concept for institution, which is the trust anchor. Essentially, every institution has a big, let's call it off-chain environment, toward which they anchor liability into the society to everybody is using their services. So one part of the big problem on creating, let's say, blockchain-based services for institution is how to create an efficient system to bridge the trust anchor into the on-chain world. And then on the other side, when the data is actually can be triggered on-chain, how to embed different cryptographic techniques to ensure that data is actually processed in a minimal way, but still in auditable and verifiable manner.
Yeah, so at Etherealize, we're focused on upgrading some of the deep inner workings of the financial markets, specifically credit markets. So I'll tackle it from two directions. One is why privacy. Right now, all of these markets run on bilateral agreements. So there are two parties. They're very used to the idea that the exact information that needs to leak leaks and nothing else. And so the only way they would consider public blockchains is with that level of privacy met. From the other direction, why be on a public blockchain? These are complex markets with parties who don't necessarily trust each other and are needing to rely on regulation, sometimes across countries. And so to have a source of truth at the center of those markets is a huge advantage that they can't do without public blockchain. So right now, they're kind of at a standstill saying, there's this upgrade potential, we can't do it without the privacy we need, and so we're trying to bring those things together.
Yeah, so I work for ABN AMRO, so that's a big Dutch bank. We have 5 million retail customers, so we're not actually building something right now specifically in privacy, but what's coming up now is, for example, a digital identity wallet. And usually how that works is data is stored in a centralized database, and then you connect with some kind of outside provider or third party, but that's of course not really safe. So we already started to think, how can we use ZK proofs, for example, so we could have selective disclosure with outside parties, and in that sense we can then protect our customer information and also let them connect with the broader Web3 environment.
Okay, great. So this is a question that, at least for Zach or Francois, but Amzah, feel free to jump in as well. Like, if you pick one concrete flow that you might care about, like maybe some bond issuance or trade or some treasury payment or whatnot, like who can see what exactly at what step, and like what is stored on-chain versus off-chain? Maybe starting, yeah, Francois, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Super happy to have the occasion to answer it. So one great way of approaching this is to approach this from the point of view of wanting to trade with a DEX or Uniswap. The nice thing is that we can offer on Miden something that offers the full anonymity. That is, we have anonymous accounts that trade with each other through nodes, so it's a mix of the account model and the UTXO model. If you're trading with a venue, that venue will want to be public because as a DEX, you want to republish the prices every time you've interacted with somebody. So you are emitting nodes into a batch that as the user, there's nothing on-chain except for what the venue might be able to decrypt. The venue performs your trade, emits notes on the exit. Those notes can then be claimed by accounts that can be fully private. So you retain full anonymity when it comes to the users, and from this to the users, with the exception of that venue, that Uniswap trader that has decided to reveal some information publicly on your account, which is always something you can do. On top of that, we build compliance flows. Now, those compliance flows are not based baked on the protocol level, but we will definitely help you put them in your app. That is, of course, you can have proofs of your transfer policy, whatever the hell that happens to be, plus, and we are definitely working on the hell. Plus, the view key policies that you might implement on top of this, which means market engineering at the local level that includes auditability workflows, that includes compliance workflows, and that includes proof of whatever it is that you need to make that market safe and threat resistant is really important to us.
Good.
Well, maybe I can take it more from a functional perspective.
Of course, yeah.
I would say that generally every issuance or distribution flow has, at least for the institutional service, has 3 key pillars. So let's say the first one is identity and trust, which is connected to onboarding flow for investors, KYC, and everything, for issuers, KYB process, and so on. The second one, which is tied to actually the blockchain account model, is probably what we call the policy enforcement. So essentially the account collect all the information from this off-chain environment and generate a trigger to a statement of executions on the blockchain. That can be done in different ways that, of course, resemble the characteristic of the underlying financial, in that sense, offer that has been triggered. And in this context, of course, privacy-preserving techniques can make an efficient distribution of peer-to-peer between, for instance, offering that can only be distributed to certain types of investors that are associated to certain types of accounts, and so on. And then you have the third pillar, which is probably reporting, which is associated to the first one, to the onboarding, but also to the second one, which triggers the trade operations on chain. These, of course, I think a glue of all these services, how we can make, let's say, we can extract from on-chain data attestation the data points that we actually need off-chain to provide traditional reporting for our clients at the end.
Cool. So yeah, the answer to this is very different depending on which flow, right? And this I think is one of the challenges in this space is like, it's hard to have general principles from how different things are. So like one example of a flow is there's a big loan, an interest payment is made, there's a ton of lenders that has to get split out. The expectation is like no one should know about that. There's no regulation around it. This is allowed to be totally private, and so we want to be able to support that end of the spectrum. On the other end, maybe there's a trade of positions in being lenders there, and there's expectations that certain administrative parties could see that the trade happened but not the price. Maybe others can see all the details, and so we've built everything around this kind of flexible model, similar to what Aleph was saying in the last talk around we don't want to be hard coding these compliance rules. We want to be saying a user or an application can determine that for themselves. And so we've got the ability within that application or user flow to either only see that data themselves or to kind of enforce additional rules around regulators being able to see things or administrative bodies or even giving that data kind of in an aggregated form to associations that aggregate more industry statistics.
Yeah, so I mostly agree with what Zach said. So in the past there, so you saw like mostly when institutions were thinking about privacy, they just start a private chain and then only maybe, let's say 20 banks, they participate. And then it's just, let's say, only them, they are able to see what's in there. But actually it's indeed much more nuanced. It depends on the use case, what type of flows and what the regulator needs to know, for example. And I can imagine if you put something like a balance information on chain, then it's sort of more on an aggregated form, and you use proof of reserves, for example.
Yeah. So I guess I'll give you a second to. I just also want to add another question, Eugenio and Amzah, for you guys. Like from banks and venues and regulators, like what are some non-negotiable requirements that you keep hearing over and over again? Like when it comes to, for example, audit trail or edibility or KYC rules, things like that, reporting requirements, latency, cutoff times.
Well, maybe I can start, but maybe think is the right fit for that. I would say accountability, then it comes to onboarding process, standardized onboarding process, and so on. And then I would say compliance associated to reporting, which for me, then it's about, if you ask my personal opinion, it's about framing concrete business requirements into, let's say, technical structures, like then the devil is in the details. Who is your user? An application or the investor? That's different. That create a different, let's say, process flow and interaction for your ecosystem. But also, I would say that the goal should be to build this system in an efficient way, because otherwise that we will have block from adoption perspective. And this is why I think account infrastructure, the way in which are evolving in Ethereum, is very cool, because they support this operational orchestration that facilitate actually to get us closer to our institutional needs.
Yeah, no real addition, so it's sort of
Okay.
like...
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so this is not something that, being an engineer, I lead personally, but there's our co-founder Azim that is an absolute machine, spending time over and over weeks with customers in the institutional space. And the top level demand that comes up is control. Who sees what, when, and for what reason? And then you devolve those conversations into details, and then they become insanely customized. You have the green variant of that, the blue variant of that, and the black variant of that, and they all are very specific about that control. And to us, this is great, because the traditional finance world has spent decades building the GAAPs, the generally accepted accounting practices, the IFRS, their AML and CTF laws, and they have been created through discussions and through networks. They are not global, and so they validate our thesis that, okay, there's a lot of diversities in what people want exactly, but the capabilities, the control, they're kind of all the same. So we're building with those capabilities at the protocol layer, and then supporting customers through their journey for what their particular favorite color of control is.
And I think also this is a consequence of how technology evolves, right? So in communities like Ethereum, technology and innovation grow so fast, then of course is take on experts like us to try to digest this into the institutional level. And I think the way in which we saw blockchain networks evolving from like setting governance rules for just private permission access in 2016 or 2017, and now having full composability like you were describing, is a great progress that we see.
I want to talk about trade-offs. So what are the main trade-offs that you're currently living with? I'm thinking about, like, for example, performance versus privacy, or global liquidity versus tight controls, or on-chain transparency versus off-chain records. Maybe starting with Zach.
Yeah, I mean, for us, the biggest thing is, fortunately, we're in a market where speed is not the biggest priority. These things, a lot of the credit markets settle in weeks, so seconds is not the biggest thing on their minds. But the UX of privacy is very difficult, right? And especially the UX of privacy as people have different priorities. And so, and especially kind of, blockchains are very good at maintaining this concept of like queued state that is coming, and how do we handle if things change, and making sure that transactions are ordered correctly. And like, there's a lot of infrastructure that we've come to rely on, right, from blockchains. And as we start queuing up private transactions, things get complicated. So there's obviously, like, Miden's doing a lot of this kind of work on their end. That's really great. But trying to figure out kind of the best user experience that meshes with privacy, when the bar for people who are used to non-blockchain systems with a lot of trust assumptions is this stuff is private and it's easy. So we got to meet that bar where they expect it.
Yeah, Francois, 30 seconds or so, like.
Yeah, I mean, so I wanted to highlight first trade-offs that we don't have thanks to Ethereum. Institutions really want to only enter markets if it's worth their time entering, which really means they want a global market with network effects, a lot of counterparties, deep liquidity, and we're a roll-up on Ethereum. Being a roll-up on Ethereum rather than a private chain or yet another L1 gives us that differentiator and that access to that deep market. Now, that's the good part. Of course, there's plenty of other things that are quite complex. For us, we care a lot about that white glove experience for an institutions entering that market, so that they can have their own conditions. And one of those challenges, of course, that we might talk about this is the challenge between privacy and threat resistance. There's a bunch of threat actors that exist in the Web3 world today, and we really want to get a better handle of that to offer a fantastic experience. And so we are less approaching that from the let's build in decentralization right away, and more from, okay, we know how to do that part, let's do it at the moment where it's what serves the customers the best.
Eugenio, I'm curious, like, how would you think about, because we're talking about these various approaches and so on, and they can be formally compliant and all of these things, but what would it actually take to make these solutions trusted and usable, both for sort of institutions and governments?
Okay, I think that everything starts from maybe trying to consider institutional services like integrated system, where every part of the system does its own specific access rule, and provided at the end data origination from apps and so on, data compression and posting from rollups, layer 3, layer 2, and data decentralization and privacy or independency into the layer 1. So I think that if we combine this system where you have, of course, an off-chain environment where the trust assumption is given to the institution, then we can allocate to apps layer 2, layer 1, different process in the issuance and distribution and settlement, generally which is associated with, for instance, financial services, so that each part of this process is associated to a stakeholder that match this capability at its best.
Amzah, how do you look at things like, in terms of not just being formally compliant, but what would it take for these systems to actually be trusted and usable by institutions? What do you think is the main?
Yeah, so for us it's really important that it's customizable. So in the beginning, you had like blockchain is just one use case, or everything is public or everything is private. So that's not like one size fits all. So for each use case, you need a certain kind of trade-offs, a certain kind of changes you can make. And what's also most important for us is to be regulatory compliant. So unfortunately, the banking sector is one of the most heavily regulated areas, and especially in Europe, where we are situated. That's, yeah, if something is not really correct regarding privacy, for example, then yeah, it doesn't fly with the regulator, and you cannot go further on, and you have a lot of like issues and maybe fines, etc.
All right, we're almost towards the end. I'm going to give you each sort of a minute each to sort of talk briefly sort of what is like one building block, if it's technical, operational, policy-wise, that you think would like meaningfully accelerate institutional adoption, and like if we meet again in like 2026, what do you think is realistic that would have happened this year? So try to keep it to like a minute each. Maybe starting with Zach.
Sure. I think right now, we kind of mentioned this before, like what we mean when we say institutional, very broad. What we mean when we say privacy, very broad. Intersection of those, extremely different in different use cases, right? Even to the point of like Francois' point before of like, oh, they care a lot about plugging into liquidity. There are use cases we're focused on that are more about building the infrastructure underneath things where they don't care that the rest of the world exists at all, right? It's just about that this is a better way to do things. And so I think it would move us forward a lot to get clarity into the specific situations that we're trying to solve for and how different they are. And part of that is on the technical kind of blockchain privacy side of this. Part of this is also from institutions, right? I don't think there's been the need for what compliance things are required to be categorized and made concrete as much as we would like them to be. And so the push on that side to really map and be clear about the different requirements and how they fit together and how these could start to turn into a protocol that can support them would level up our ability to build something towards that versus kind of the fragmented world more run by lawyers that has not been made as hardened as we would want it to be.
Amzah?
Yeah, so the good thing is the past 7 years since I'm active in this space, the tech came a long way. So zero knowledge proofs, it's a lot of development on there, fully homomorphic encryption. I think one of the most important things to improve is the education to regulators, also institutions, because they probably heard about zero-knowledge proof, fully homomorphic encryption, but they don't really know how that works. So you can say, oh yeah, it's really safe and it's a real proof, but they don't understand why it's a correct proof and why they should trust that. And how they all still think for a majority from the regulators is also still from legal point of view, something written in contracts. When something goes wrong, who can we call? And if something breaks, who will fix it? And if there's nothing to, no one to call, then that's a bit a difficult perception for them.
Cool. Eugenio, 1 minute.
Yeah, maybe, okay, I'd like to pick 3 small things for each. Well, on the technological side, I think it's probably one of the things that it will benefit most is ZK proving, real-time proving, aggregation, because this actually enable to tackle an operational problem that we have is to build complex use case which serve financial or institutional clients, which can combine apps, institutional clients, and layer 1. And then on the policy side, I like to support the statement on the education, because I think as a community, especially in engaging institutional clients, I think, again, it will matter a lot to start thinking about Ethereum as an integrated ecosystem and integrated system itself. I wish for the 26, probably from the business perspective, we have seen this year a lot of starting initially activity. I would like to see more engaging collaboration between projects so that application in the market can really start having access to global liquidity, global network.
Francois?
Yeah, so if we met in a year, I would like to have, as we plan, launched the mainnet of Miden in the spring, so we're going to have celebrated that. But beyond this, and my particular view, I would like us to be on our way to full decentralization, have all the offering those privacy flow. But roughly, the idea is that this will take a village, right? So the core thing I want to see happen is really more engagement. That is, we have those ideas at the moment that privacy is at odds with compliance. That's not really true, but the truth is that it will take a lot of work towards marrying the two together. That is, first, before even compliance, let's agree we would like to not have so many terrorists involved in the place where we trade, right? So the actual threat resistance and what compromises we need to make to actually build extremely secure protocols needs to go a little bit further. More importantly, we also want institutions that help us shape the kind of markets they want to see, because we know this is going to be messy, this is going to be peculiar to their particular needs, and we're completely fine with that. We want to offer at the protocol level the control that they will install between their apps, their endpoints, and their counterparts.
Okay, thank you. We're almost at the very end. I just want to give each of you like 10 to 20 seconds to mention something, maybe something that's happened this week, or just plug something that we mentioned, just like very briefly, so people who are interested can find out more. 10 to 20 seconds, starting with Amzah.
Yeah, so I found it interesting. So 3 years ago, I was a volunteer helping one of the first Devconnects, so that's actually the first one. And regarding how people look at institutions compared to now, that's improved. Yeah.
I mean, it's just amazing how much privacy is in the air this year. And my background is in the security space, and it has been a recurring theme how security researchers who understand this stuff are lacking. So anyone who's at that intersection, encourage you to go all in.
I'll pick probably data regulatory harmonization. I think there is much hope for TKP in a compliant data main, and probably also the Ethereum interoperability layer that I think will help a lot bringing institution on chain.
Oh my. It's very difficult as an engineer when you ask me what I'm excited about, you usually hear about an extremely niche subject. We've landed precompiles on Miden recently, and the really cool thing to me is that this opens the verification of flows that involve machine learning of any kind, right? So we've been talking about looking at transactions, we've been talking about allow listing, blacklisting, which amounts, the travel rule, etc. That's cool. If you're an extreme nerd like me, you really want to do machine learning and then proofs of machine learning, that's now a thing we can do.
I want to thank all the panelists. We heard like some very interesting perspectives, all from like technology and policy and institution and engineering and so on. And we just scratched the surface, but I recommend you guys to come up to these people and talk more if you're interested in this topic. And that's it for us. Thank you.
Thanks.